I used to think creepy hotel tales were nothing but urban legends, until I almost became one. I'll never forget the moment I first set foot inside that old hotel. It was around midnight, and I was dead tired from a business trip that went way longer than planned. Honestly, all I wanted was a bed to crash on for a few hours before hitting the road again. The place was called the Silverwood Hotel. Sounded fancy, right? But the sign outside looked kinda worn out, and the lobby was super quiet, almost like nobody ever showed up there. I walked up to the front desk, dragged my suitcase behind me, and tried not to look too exhausted. The desk clerk, some older guy, who barely lifted his head, handed me a key without much small talk. "You're in room 412, he said, giving me this look I couldn't quite read. Maybe he thought I was trouble, or maybe he was just tired of working nights. "It's the only room available," he added. At that point, I didn't care if the bed was a pile of rocks. I just needed sleep. So I took the rickety old elevator up to the 4th floor, noticing the dim light flickering overhead. The whole vibe was weirdly still, you know? Not a single noise anywhere. No guests coming or going. I stepped out into this long hallway that smelled like old carpet and cleaning products. My room was at the very end, 412, which somehow felt even quieter and darker than the rest of the corridor. I slipped the key into the lock and pushed open the door. The space looked normal enough at first. Bed, desk, a small TV, slightly outdated furniture. The only thing off was this faint, musty smell, like nobody had stayed there for a while. I tossed my jacket on the bed and went to put my suitcase in the closet. That's when I spotted an old, beat-up notebook tucked behind a spare blanket. The cover was practically falling apart, and the edges were all frayed. I've got this bad habit of being too curious for my own good, so of course I picked it up and started flipping through. Turns out it was a diary of sorts, no name on it, just random dates scribbled down. Some entries were barely legible, smudged ink and all. I scanned a few lines, expecting something boring, or maybe just a teenage scribble about heartbreak. But no, what I found was a series of super bizarre accounts describing weird noises at night, missing items, unsettling encounters with the hotel staff. One line read, "They watch me every time I walk down the hallway. I don't think they're going to let me leave." I literally felt a chill run up my spine. I tried to shrug it off. Could be someone's creative writing experiment, right? People get bored, they write spooky stuff. But the more pages I read, the more freaked out I got. The writer mentioned room 412 a lot. Talked about hearing footsteps outside the door at 3 a.m. that would suddenly stop whenever they went to check the peephole. They wrote about how guests seemed to vanish without a trace. The creepiest part? It was all dated in a timeline that stretched back years. The handwriting changed, sometimes smooth, sometimes shaky, as if different moods or even different people had added entries. At that point, my eyes were burning from exhaustion, but my mind was racing. I was too wired to sleep. I checked my phone. 1:24 a.m. Great, still hours till morning. I decided to go downstairs and ask the clerk about this strange diary. Maybe it was just lost property. But when I got to the lobby, the desk was empty. No staff in sight. I leaned over and saw an open folder sitting on the counter. Couldn't help myself. I looked inside. There were copies of missing person reports, all dated from various times over the past decade. And I recognized a detail. A few of these missing people had last been seen at the Silverwood Hotel. Right then, I felt something like a tap on my shoulder, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned around to find a tall guy in a black suit, not the same old clerk from before. This man had a very calm face, but his eyes seemed too focused, like he was studying me. "You look lost," he said in a low voice. I tried to sound casual, probably did a terrible job, saying something like, "Oh, I was just looking for a snack machine." He gave a tight smile and said, "We don't have one in the lobby. Is there anything else I can help you with?" I almost asked about the missing person reports right then and there, but something in his expression stopped me. Instead, I mumbled, "No thanks," and hurried back to the elevator. The entire ride up, my heart was pounding. This was insane. Could the stuff in the diary be real? Was I just letting my imagination run wild? Back in my room, I locked the door, slid the chain across, and set the diary on the desk. My brain told me to pack up and bail, But weirdly enough, I felt this urge to figure out what the heck was going on. Maybe it was arrogance, maybe it was pure stupidity, I don't know. But I started reading more entries. Don't try to talk to the manager, they'll mark you. I heard them outside my door again last night. I tried to warn the police, but no one believed me. At this point, I noticed that the final pages had been torn out. The diary ended abruptly with, "I won't let them silence me. If anyone finds this, you need to..." And that was it. Like the story was ripped away mid-sentence. My eyes flicked to the door as I heard the softest shuffle of footsteps in the hallway. My entire body tensed up. I crept over to the door and listened. Nothing. Just dead silence. When I looked through the peephole, the corridor was empty. Still, I had that gut feeling that someone, something, was on the other side not too long ago. Sleep was impossible. I paced around the tiny room, thinking about those missing person files, that weird man in the suit, the old clerk who practically vanished, and this diary. Could it all be some elaborate prank? Or had I just stumbled into something much darker than I ever intended? I decided that in the morning, I'd check out and take the diary with me, maybe even show it to the authorities if I felt brave enough. But around 3 a.m., just like the diary mentioned, I heard footsteps again. And not just footsteps. There was a subtle rasping sound at the bottom of my door, like someone sliding a piece of paper underneath. I swear it felt like my heart was about to leap out of my chest. I waited a second, then stepped forward, and sure enough, there was an envelope on the floor. Nothing written on it. I picked it up, opened it, and found a blank piece of paper inside. Totally empty, except for a tiny circular stamp in the corner with the hotel's logo. I mean, who sends a blank note at 3 in the morning? That was it for me. I wasn't sticking around any longer. I hurriedly shoved everything back into my suitcase, threw on my jacket, and booked it out of the room. The corridor felt colder somehow, and every sound, even my own footsteps, made me jump. By the time I got to the elevator, I was practically slamming the lobby button. When the doors slid open on the ground floor, guess who was waiting there? The suit guy again, wearing the same calm expression. "Leaving so soon?" he asked. I couldn't even fake politeness. "Yeah," I said. "Emergency back home." He raised an eyebrow, like he knew I was lying, but he just nodded. "Have a safe trip," he murmured, his voice dripping with something I can only describe as quiet menace. I turned in my key at the front desk and dashed out the entrance without a single glance back. I half expected him to follow me or stop me, but he didn't. The cool night air felt incredible against my hot cheeks. My car was still parked out front, so I jumped in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the silhouette of someone watching me from the hotel doorway. It's been a while since that night, but I can't shake this feeling that the story isn't over. I did go to the police. They listened politely, took the diary, and promised to look into it. Then they told me they couldn't verify most of the details and that the missing person files were part of an ongoing investigation. I've tried following up a few times, but I keep getting the runaround. Part of me wonders if I made it out by pure luck, and another part of me keeps thinking about whoever wrote that diary. What happened to them? Did they vanish like everyone else? Is the hotel still renting out room 412 to unsuspecting guests? That night feels like some surreal nightmare, yet it was all too real, and I've got the sleepless nights to prove it. So that's my story. If you ever find yourself at the Silverwood Hotel, if you're tired and desperate and they hand you the key to room 412, just be careful, okay? Sometimes the things we brush off as superstition or old ghost tales have a way of becoming our reality, especially when we least expect it. And trust me, you don't want to be the next name in that diary.